St. Michael's Cathedral has provided a place of worship for the Catholics of Toronto since 1848. Throughout its history, extensive work has been done to maintain the cathedral, both inside and out. And while achieving high standards of quality, this work has sometimes strayed from the original architectural vision. One area where this is most evident is the nave, and work is currently underway to return it to its past glory. For nearly 2 centuries, parishioners have entered St. Michael's Cathedral through the narthex and into the main body of the church. This area of worship is called the nave and provides the central approach to the high altar. Separate from the chancel, which houses the clergy, the nave is the main seating area for St. Michael's faithful laity. The nave is one of the most special, yet commonly used places in the cathedral. It is where worshippers can find solitude in prayer, as well as participate in the communal celebration of the Word of God during St. Michael's many public services. It is truly a space designed for the people and to be used by the people of Toronto. The neo-Gothic or Gothic revival style, popular at the time of St. Michael's construction, utilized pointed arches and high vaulted ceilings to reach into the heavens and create an open and airy atmosphere within the confines of the church. Gold stars on a sky blue background sought to reinforce that concept. And although Bishop Michael Power did not live to see his vision completed, stars on a deep blue paint did adorn St. Michael's ceilings in the 1860s. However, as decades passed and renovations became necessary, the artistic design strayed from the original vision. Current renovations aim to bring St. Michael's Cathedral back to the glory of that original concept. Nowhere will this change be more evident than in the vaulted ceilings of the nave. A tender went out, and artists nationwide and beyond our borders submitted their designs. The contract for this incredible undertaking was awarded to Ecclesiastical Art and Design, a family-run studio from Yonkers, New York. Iconographer Sviatoslav Makarenko specializes in all types of ecclesiastical art and is one of the continent's leading artists in traditional iconography. You can find his murals, mosaics, and stained glass works in churches and cathedrals throughout Canada and the United States. Sviat has been working in these holy shrines his entire life, beginning at the age of 8 under the tutelage of his father Boris. He is now looking to pass these family traditions and skills onto his daughter, Ruslana.
We're going to be ready, no matter what, because we're prepping like crazy.
With one last review of the design, it's time to put the game plan into motion. The ceiling at St. Michael's Cathedral is about to be reborn.
We were asked to go and visit with the new Archbishop of Peterborough, Bishop McGrattan. And as our architect, Terry White from Venton Group, opened the doors to the cathedral in Peterborough, and I looked up and I saw the Gothic ceiling that we are about to recreate here at St. Michael's Cathedral. Our artist is coming to paint the ceiling blue back to its original Gothic color and the gold stars. There's going to be, I think, 15,000 gold stars on that ceiling.
The ceilings in the cathedral have been subjected to multiple layers of painting, 3 or 4, over the past 100 years. These multiple layers of painting are the visions of various people that were running the cathedral at the time and may not have been necessarily sensitive to traditional Gothic architecture. So what our program is about, again with Father Michael's vision and guidance, we are taking those ceilings back to an original Gothic style of paint, which is a blue background with stars.
So the story of the restoration of the nave ceiling will begin by removing those layers of paint one at a time and cataloging the passage of time. Workers begin this monumental task by erecting a massive steel scaffolding structure within the nave to give the artists and consultants access to assess the ceiling. And upon first inspection, an early issue rears its head. Some of the original materials have conspired to make this job even more challenging.
One of the things that happened when we actually got into the attic space, we found that plaster was deteriorating. Paint has been peeling off this cathedral ceiling for the last 50 years. Why it's happening is because one of the original types of paint that was used on the ceiling space is called calcimine paint, and it's like a fresco type of technique. The paint actually gets right into the plaster, and once it's embedded in the plaster, it's very difficult for any future coats of paint to adhere. They may adhere for 5-10 years, but then as the calcimine paint slowly comes out of the plaster, the paint peels away. And so painting over top of old paint doesn't change the fact that the original paint on top of that calcimine, the adhesion is letting go. This is what's been happening. So not only that, we also found that some of the plaster was actually deteriorating and letting go from the lath and the structure inside the cathedral. So we bring in a company called Historical Plaster, and they came in and have installed a solution which essentially saturates the existing plaster with a polymer plasticizer product that gets into all the cracks and consolidates the plaster. So it strengthens it so we won't have any more failures.
The process that we're engaged in is the application of an acrylic resin to the back side of the plaster surface. And we use 3 successively richer dilutions of this acrylic material. The first one is very dilute and penetrates almost as fast as we apply it. The second one, because there's a pathway made by the first one, penetrates almost as far and carries more solids as a richer mixture. And the third one is an application of the rich, very coherent resin that basically does the bulk of the work.
After the plaster has been saturated and solidified, a cleaning crew comes in to prepare the surfaces for paint stripping and documentation of the various layers. Then a new crew comes in to tackle another specialized task. Some sections of the cathedral ceiling are buried under a dropped coffered ceiling. Those areas will need to be torn down to get back to the cathedral's original vaulted ceiling design. The area is first sealed off with poly sheeting to avoid contaminating the other areas of the cathedral with the dust and debris caused by demolition. Next, workers remove all plaster and wood structures from the area. The precarious location of these false ceilings makes traditional machine demolition impossible. So the work is done carefully by hand. As the dropped ceiling removal comes to a close, experts gather to map out the next steps in the removal of the nearly 2 centuries worth of paint on the upper walls and ceiling.
All this is cracked, it's coming out, right?
Yeah.
One option is to use dry ice to essentially freeze all the paint layers off at once. A test strip on a small hidden section is done to ensure that the process will not damage the historic ceiling. And while seemingly successful on a small scale, the CO2 method of paint removal is deemed not ideal for a job of this large scale. After much discussion, it is determined that a combination of chemical removers and good old-fashioned elbow grease is the best plan of attack. And painstaking manual removal of the layers will also facilitate their documentation by a paint historian.
This is an architectural paint research project in that we're trying to document the finishes that were put on this cathedral over time, which is really a story and a history of decorative finishes in Toronto. What you're looking at is probably here the 1930s type finishes. And then below that, you can see a much neater and more defined stencil. That's an earlier period. I'm not quite sure what period that would be yet. And part of what you do when you do this, you have to have a sense of the history of the building, when alterations took place, and then you can start to date and say, okay, this is this period and this is that period. And this, I mean, you can see here, I mean, truly sort of Gothic decoration here. This is probably the second scheme on the ceiling, and then that's the third. But beautiful borders, lovely panels here, sort of wonderful little striping. They were really good about doing lines, and people did this freehand. They wouldn't take tape. They would literally, there's special brushes for it, and this is all hand done. They were that good. This one, you can see here just beginning to pop through. This is actually the first one. There are a lot of patches in there, but this is the first one. And then we've got this other one we think, we're not sure yet. I mean, this is really where, you know, a little more uncovering. But it looks like it might be sort of a Japanese sort of influence on the design here. And you find that one in the side aisle. So everybody goes down to what was the first finish, but sometimes that isn't the most interesting thing. It's about an evolution, I think, of a congregation. And if you've got the Japanese influence here, you're talking about a fairly sophisticated congregation. They'll be selecting, you know, the latest, most up-to-date finishes and the trends of the period. So I think that's what we have here.
While Mary and her team of paint historians finish stripping and documenting the layers of paint, another crew is hard at work. In addition to the paintwork on the upper walls and ceiling, work must be done to restore the plaster fixtures in those areas.
As you sound your way around, you can hear the loose areas. So that's solid there, and that's the sound of a loose piece. So that's how we identify the areas, and then other than that, we're looking for obvious cracks. Consistently throughout the building, there's a crack behind this large molding, and this is the heaviest part of it with a fairly decent timber behind. So we're pinning this every 2 feet in order to stabilize this whole molding. It's an Aramis gel. Those are stainless steel threaded rod so that they carry lots of the gel all the way to the back of the hole. Like the threads in the rod help it to carry a lot of adhesive. And obviously the threaded rod, it'll never rot. But the real strength is in the gel because it sets up almost like a shock absorber around the pin. So the gel surrounds the pin all the way through and creates a bond between the structure behind and the plaster in front. This is a round dowel. You can see this crack, it's consistent all the way along. So you can see we've injected this about every 1.5 inches. And this was all loose before. In fact, I couldn't even sound it with my hammer when we first, started to look at it until we did some work on it. And then I can check it and it's completely solid now, whereas it was close to falling off before. We found that these bosses are solid. They really don't need the wire. I think somebody put them there just as insurance. Sometimes, in fact, the wire, if it's too hard, it'll scrub and actually break pieces off, so it can be detrimental to the ornament.
With the dropped ceilings out of the way, historic paint documentation complete, and fixture restoration well underway, the stripping crew can come in and strip away the remaining paint, achieving the blank canvas needed for the final stage of ceiling revival.
Full steam ahead with the paint removals. We're using a Peel Away 7 product, which is an eco-friendly liquid-based paint removal system. We apply the Peel Away 7, and then there's a type of paper that's applied over top of the Peel Away. And once there's a setting time, if you will, that paper is then scraped off and get back to a white plaster substrate, which we then can do some lime plaster repairs and prepare for the new painting.
The time has finally arrived for the father and daughter painting team to work their magic on the ceiling of the cathedral.
We have our concept, we have our drawing, now we have to execute. And every ceiling, of course, is just a little bit different, sometimes warped, sometimes off 90. So we have to walk around and essentially feel our way through the entire ceiling, and then make all our decisions as to how we're actually going to paint the final product so that it looks as beautiful as we can make. A lot of beautiful things, just like a Bach piece, starts with just a simple melody. So the simpler things are, the more beautiful they might be. But the simpler they are, the harder they are to execute well.
And at long last, the moment everyone has been awaiting has arrived. Sviat lays the first strokes of paint on the ceiling.
A real true artist always is interested in longevity, and that's the chemist part of being an artist. It had significance in the old days what pigments you mixed together, because if you mixed pigment that had some sulfur base in it, it would react with another mineral that you had or a metal. Your beautiful painting that you worked on for 3/4 of a year would turn black in 5 years. You're done. So you had to know that. That was very important. There's no color in the church that we use that's just off a coloring book or something like that. I actually mix pigments in order to get the color I need, because that's what I know. There will be a specific color for this ceiling, that blue, that I will not repeat again. I've never used it before. We mixed it just for this job. We'll use it, and that'll be it.
Painters start from the top down. So we started with our top panels and our fleur-de-lis motif, which when my father and I first walked into this cathedral, and we noticed that the walls had this red and yellow fleur-de-lis motif, almost like a wallpaper. So we decided, because that's a very important motif in Gothic art, that we wanted to incorporate it into our ceiling design.
The artisans continue to press forward, one panel at a time. A deep blue, reminiscent of the original intended color, now graces the ceiling, accented by a multitude of colored stars. The newly painted decorative stars are then kissed with a touch of gold. Ruslana and another ecclesiastical design crew member are hard at work with the intricate task of gold leafing the stars.
This is an interior application. This is clean gold, never tarnishes. So that's all applied. That's prepared with an adhesive. And then we polish it to get the clean surfaces and the clean edges.
These gold stars are not only special in what they represent historically and spiritually, but also because they represent a sense of community among the parishioners of St. Michael's. Each of these stars can be claimed by making a donation to the St. Michael's Cathedral Renovation Fund, creating an intimate connection between the donors, whether from the church or the Greater Toronto community, and the magnificent landmark that is St. Michael's Cathedral. In addition to the ceiling painting and the gold leafing of the stars and accents, all the ornamental plaster bosses adorning the ceiling beams must also receive special attention. With the ceiling painting and gold leafing nearing completion, people involved in the various stages of work, including Father Bush and Cardinal Collins,
Oh, that is so beautiful.
Visit for a sneak peek at the final work of art.
The pictures that people send me don't do it justice.
No,
you have to be up here to see it. You have to be up here to feel it. Like, you truly are blessed to be a part of it.
When something's really good, I get goosebumps. I got them right now. I do. Wow, this is special.
Wow, that's amazing. Look at the stars. That is really nice.
A milestone in the restoration work has been reached. Thousands of stars now adorn the nave and the sanctuary of the cathedral. But there's still plenty to do. The side aisles and the walls await their new colors.
We're completing the main nave, and that's a big milestone for us. Now we're descending to the side aisles, and the excitement there for us is that now that we know everything's working very well, and that ceiling that we've done now looks very good, and everybody's very happy, but they don't understand that it's incomplete.
Like my dad was saying, it's a great psychological relief to be done with the main nave. That is the main body of the cathedral. It's the most work because it's the big hammer beams, you have all the bosses, you have this whole ornamental plaster frieze that doesn't exist in the side aisles. So now in the side aisles, really all you have are stars, and you're just executing something you've already made like 8,000 of.
Father and daughter can at least stand back for a moment, look up, and feel a huge sense of accomplishment. It is evident when watching this family work that they fully embrace the task at hand and take an enormous amount of pride in providing this amazing Canadian landmark with an injection of vitality, of new color and design.
We are happy with it, and it's nice now because people are starting to see it with the scaffold coming down, and I think everybody's very happy. I think Father Michael's very happy. I mean, it must be some kind of feeling as like an 80-year-old parishioner that's been sitting here for how many years to come in and suddenly it's completely different. So I hope all the people enjoy it too.
We came up with the idea, and it feels very good because it looks very good. This is one of the best jobs, no question.
It is a true work of art, harkening back to St. Michael's original design of the past and representative of the vision for the future of this cathedral.